Seuss Reddit stories detailed. I found my husband's secret dating profile while he was sitting next to me. He had been active on it that morning. My name is Jessica. I am 36 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas, and 14 months ago I was sitting on our couch on a Saturday morning next to my husband of 8 years scrolling through my phone when an advertisement appeared for a dating app, and the profile photograph in the advertisement was my husband's face. Not a similar face. His face. His specific face that I had woken up next to that morning. The advertisement was personalized. The app's algorithm had surfaced a profile it thought might interest me based on location proximity, and the profile it had surfaced was my husband sitting 18 inches to my left. I looked at my phone. I looked at my husband. He was looking at his own phone, and had not seen what I was looking at. I did not say anything in that moment. I took a screenshot. Then I opened the app and I found his profile and I looked at it carefully. The profile had been active that morning. The app showed a green dot indicating recent activity. He had been active on a dating profile while sitting next to me on our couch on a Saturday morning. The profile contained photographs I had not seen. Not old photographs, recent ones, taken in locations I recognized from the past year. He had been building this profile with intention, and with recent material. I put my phone face down on the cushion between us. I sat there for another 20 minutes while we watched television, and I did not say anything because I needed to think before I spoke, and I needed to speak from a place of certainty rather than from the shock that was moving through me like cold water. My husband's name is Michael. We had been married for 8 years and had a 6-year-old son named Oliver, and I had believed our marriage was solid in the ways that I had been paying attention to. I filed for divorce 14 months ago. The process took 9 months. Michael's attorney argued various things about the dating profile, that it was inactive, that nothing had happened, that having a profile was not evidence of anything physical. My attorney presented the metadata from the profile, including the green dot from that Saturday morning, and the regular activity pattern over the previous 7 months, and the location data that placed the account's most active periods at locations that were not our home. The divorce was finalized 5 months ago. Oliver spends alternating weeks with each of us. He is 7 now and doing well in both homes. I have a new apartment that I chose entirely myself. I do not have a dating profile. I am not in a hurry. I think about that Saturday morning sometimes. The couch, the advertisement, the 18 inches between us. And I think about how much can be happening inside a small distance, and how little of it is visible until something surfaces it. The algorithm surfaced it. I am glad it did. Update 3 months later. Oliver asked me last month if I was happy. He is 7 and he asks direct questions in the way of children who have decided that directness is more efficient than hinting. I told him yes. He said good, and then asked if we could have pancakes. We had pancakes. I sat across from my son at our kitchen table in my apartment, and I thought about the couch and about Michael and about the past 14 months. And I thought that pancakes on a Saturday morning in my own kitchen with my son was exactly the right place to be. I meant yes when I said it. That is enough. Story 2 Romantic Reddit stories. My husband left love letters for me every day for a year after I said I was falling out of love. This is what happened. My name is Catherine. I am 43 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. And 2 years ago I told my husband of 14 years that I was falling out of love with him. I told him clearly and without softening because softening had not been working, and I had decided that honesty was the only remaining option. What my husband did in response was not what I had expected. His name is Daniel. He did not argue. He did not cry immediately, though he cried later. He did not ask me what he could do in the transactional way of someone looking for a solution to manage. He went quiet for a long time. And then he said he understood. And that he was not going to lose me without trying something. The something he tried was letters. The next morning I found a handwritten letter on the kitchen counter addressed to me. It described a specific memory. Our third date, a restaurant we had gone to, something I had said that he had found funny and had remembered for 14 years. It was 3 paragraphs long, and it was specific in a way that told me he had been thinking about it before he wrote it. The following morning there was another letter. This one was about the night we had found out I was pregnant with our daughter. The specific texture of that evening, what he had felt, what he had not known how to say at the time and was saying now. Day 3 another letter. Day for another letter. He left them every morning for a year. 365 letters. Each one specific. Each one a memory or an observation or something he had been carrying that he had not known how to say in conversation. Some of them were funny. Some of them were difficult. He wrote honestly about the years he had been less present than I needed, about the patterns he had recognized in therapy that had contributed to where we were. Some of them were about things so small I had forgotten them, and that his remembering told me something about the quality of his attention during years when I had believed he was not paying attention. I read every letter the morning it appeared. I kept every one in a box. I did not tell him I was keeping them for 6 months because I did not know what keeping them meant, and I did not want to give him information about my internal process before I understood it myself. At the 6-month mark I told him I was keeping the letters. He nodded as though he had expected this. At the 9-month mark I told him I was not falling out of love anymore. At the 11-month mark I told him I was in love with him in a way I had not been in years. He wrote the 365th letter on the anniversary of the first one, and left it on the kitchen counter. And I read it at the kitchen table, and it said simply that he hoped I knew how much he loved me, and that he was done trying to say it in letters, and was going to spend the rest of his life saying it in other ways. I folded it and put it in the box with the others. Then I went and found him in the next room, and I said what I needed to say in person. Update: 4 months later. Our daughter found the box last month. She is 12 and perceptive, and she came to find me holding a letter and asked what they were. I told her they were letters her father had written to me. She asked if she could read one. I said that was between her and her father, and she went to find him. They sat together for an hour, and I heard their conversation from the next room without listening to its specifics because it was theirs. When she came out, she looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. And she said, "Dad really loves you," and I said, "I know," and she said, "I hope someone loves me like that someday." I told her I hoped so too, and I meant it completely. Story 3: Stories Infidelity. I discovered my wife had an emotional affair for 2 years. The man she had it with told me himself, "My name is Robert. I am 45 years old, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and 16 months ago a man I had never met knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening and told me he had been emotionally involved with my wife for 2 years, and that he was telling me because he had decided he could no longer live with not telling me. His name is David. He was 43 years old, a colleague of my wife's, and he stood on my porch with the specific composure of someone who has rehearsed a difficult thing many times, and is now delivering it. He told me about 2 years of daily messages, shared confidences, a relationship that had never been physical, but that had been, by his description, the primary emotional relationship in my wife's life for the duration. He told me he had ended it 3 months earlier because he had realized what it was, and had not been able to continue it in good conscience. He told me he was telling me because I deserved to know, and because he believed my wife would not tell me herself. He said he was sorry and he left. My wife's name is Susan. When I confronted her that evening, she did not deny it. She told me the full version, which was both what David had said and more. She told me the 2 years had happened inside a period when she had felt profoundly alone in our marriage, and that David had been the person she had talked to about that loneliness rather than me. She said she had told herself it was not an affair because it was not physical, and she had used that distinction to avoid examining what it actually was. What it actually was everything she had needed from a marriage given to someone who was not her husband. I sat with that for a long time. Our couples therapist, we were in couples therapy within the week, had a phrase for what Susan described that I have found useful. She called it an intimacy transfer. The closeness that belongs inside a marriage had been transferred outside it, and the marriage had been running on the remainder, which had not been enough. We have been in therapy for 16 months. I will not tell you things are simple because they are not simple. What I will tell you is that Susan is more honest with me now than she has been in years, and that I am more present with her than I have been in years, and that the combination of those two things is producing something I did not believe was possible in the weeks after David knocked on my door. David did something difficult and honest on my porch, and I have thought about that more than I expected to. He did not have to tell me. He told me because he believed I deserved to know. I disagree with the choices he made for 2 years. I respect the choice he made on a Tuesday evening. Update: 4 months later. Susan told me last month that she had reached out to David to tell him that what he had done had been the right thing even though it had been hard, and that she was grateful to him for it. She told me she had sent the message and wanted me to know. I sat with that for a moment. Then I told her I thought it was the right thing to do. David responded with 2 sentences. He said he was glad things were better, and that he wished us well. Susan showed me the messages before she sent and after she received. The showing me was the point, and we both knew it, and I told her so, and she said she knew. We had dinner. It was ordinary. Ordinary is what we are building toward, and ordinary is what we had that evening, and I think ordinary earned is one of the better things available. Story 4 Seuss Reddit stories detailed. My husband had been leading a double life for 5 years. His other life was 12 miles away, and we had mutual friends. My name is Linda. I am 41 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and 18 months ago I discovered that my husband of 10 years had been living a parallel life in a neighborhood 12 miles from ours that included a woman named Karen, a shared apartment, a social circle that included 3 people we both knew separately and who had apparently maintained the separation for 5 years, and a version of himself that he had presented to that world as single. 12 miles. The mutual friends, 3 people who had attended our wedding and had maintained separate friendships with my husband's other life simultaneously, were the most difficult part of the discovery to process. Not more difficult than the 10 years or the 12 miles, but difficult in a specific way that told me something about how constructed the separation had been and how many people had participated in maintaining it. I found out because one of the mutual friends broke. Her name is Patricia, and she had been one of my bridesmaids, and she called me on a Thursday afternoon and said she needed to tell me something, and she told me everything she knew, which was considerable. Patricia had known for 2 years. She had held it for 2 years and had reached a point where holding it was no longer possible, and had chosen me over the secret. I drove to the address Patricia gave me. I sat outside the building for 20 minutes. Then I went in and I knocked on the door, and Karen answered, and I told her who I was, and I watched her face do the specific thing that faces do when the thing they have been afraid of arrives. Karen had not known he was married for the first year. She had found out in year 2 and had stayed because she had already built a life around him, and because he had told her the marriage was ending. He had told her the marriage was ending for 3 years. My husband's name is Thomas, and he arrived at that apartment 40 minutes after I knocked on Karen's door because Karen had called him and told him I was there, and he walked through the door and saw me sitting on Karen's couch, and he went through several expressions in rapid succession that I watched with the specific attention of someone who is recording everything for later examination. The divorce took 10 months. Thomas's attorney was aggressive. Mine was better. I received the house, a settlement that the financial forensics accountant described as appropriate, and the specific satisfaction of a process conducted with documentation so thorough that Thomas's aggressiveness had nothing to push against. Karen was not in Thomas's life 6 months after I knocked on her door. I know this because Patricia told me, and because Patricia, who had held a secret for 2 years that had cost her a friendship she valued, has been trying to repair things between us in ways that are genuine, and that I am receiving slowly and carefully. I am not there yet with Patricia. I am further along than I was 6 months ago. The house is mine. I planted a garden in the backyard this spring. I am in it every morning before work, and it is mine, and it is enough, and on the mornings when it is more than enough I stand there in it, and I feel something that I think is the specific satisfaction of a life that is entirely yours and that nobody else has a claim on. Update 4 months later. Patricia came to see the garden last month. She stood in my backyard and looked at what I had planted and said it was beautiful, and I said thank you, and we stood there for a while without saying anything difficult. Then she asked if she could come again sometime, and I said yes. It was the first yes I had given her, and she understood what it meant because she said thank you in the specific way of someone receiving something they were not certain they would receive. We had coffee after the garden. It was careful, and it was a beginning, and I think careful beginnings are worth more than easy ones. Story 5 Marital Affair Stories. My husband confessed an affair that had ended 8 years ago. I had to decide whether 8 years of not knowing changed everything. My name is Sandra. I am 47 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington, and 10 months ago my husband of 22 years sat across from me and confessed an affair that had ended 8 years before he told me about it. He had been carrying it for 8 years. He was telling me now because his therapist had told him that carrying it was affecting him, and that honesty was the only path forward that did not involve continued concealment. He told me about a woman named Claire, a colleague, a relationship that had lasted 8 months when I was 41 and he was 43, and that had ended when Claire had moved to another city for a new job, and that my husband had ended rather than follow. He told me everything he knew I would want to know: the timeline, the circumstances, the ending. He cried. He said he had lived with it for 8 years, and that the living with it had cost him things he was only now understanding in therapy. My husband's name is David. We have 2 sons, both adults now, both out of the house. We had been in what I had considered a good marriage for 22 years. The affair had happened inside those 22 years at year 14, and I had had no idea and had spent 8 subsequent years believing in a marriage that had contained something I had not known about. I want to tell you what I did with this information because that is the question people always ask, and the honest answer is that I did not know for several months. I spent 3 months in individual therapy before I made any decisions about David or our marriage. My therapist was a woman named Dr. Anna, who asked me useful questions rather than telling me what to do. The most useful question she asked was, what would you be preserving if you stayed? And what would you be preserving if you left? I spent a long time with both halves of that question. What I would be preserving if I stayed was 22 years of a marriage that was real in the 22 years, even if it had contained something I had not known about. What I would be preserving if I left was my right to have known, and to have chosen based on knowing. I am still married to David. I want to be honest about the complexity in that sentence. It is not a triumphant staying, it is a considered one. David is in therapy. We are in couples therapy. The marriage we are in now is the first marriage we have had where everything is on the table. I told David that the only version of staying I was capable of was one in which everything was visible, and that if anything was ever hidden again, that would be the end. He said he understood. He has been in therapy every week for 10 months, and I have watched him do the work, and the work is real and visible, and I am taking it as the evidence it is, while also understanding that evidence requires time to accumulate into something I can call trust. Update 4 months later. David showed me something last month that his therapist had suggested he share when he was ready. It was a letter he had written to me during the affair. A letter he had never sent, written at the 3-month mark when he had been trying to decide whether to end it. The letter said he was ending it because he could not continue doing something that was this dishonest to someone he loved this much. He had ended it. The letter had never been sent. I read it twice. Then I asked David why he had not told me when he ended it. He said he had been afraid of losing me and had told himself that ending it was enough, and that telling me would only cause pain for something that was over. I told him that the pain of not knowing had been paid over 8 years in a currency he had not told me I was spending. He said he knew that now. I put the letter down between us on the table. We sat with it for a while. Then I said I was glad he had ended it when he did. He said he was glad too. We had dinner after that, and I thought about 22 years and about 8 years of not knowing, and about the letter on the table, and I thought that the letter had been the most honest thing in the room, and that it had taken 10 months and a therapist to get it there, but that it was there now and that there was something.